And I put this in my notes. I quote, "It drives me nuts when someone asks me if something's still available. I respond within seconds and then get left on scene, or if I give the price, they don't check DMs for a day or two." That is the worst. Absolute worst. You are not the main character of your story, your own story. Or I'm not an NPC and you're what the fuck the metaphor is. I don't care. God damn it, answer your DMs.
Bring me the next shiny new thing. Bring me the next shiny new thing. Bring me the next shiny new thing. Bring me the next shiny new thing.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Big Bad Figcast. My name is Brett, also known as GeekOver40, and today I am joined by my favoriteest co-host in the whole world. Don't tell my other co-host that. Kerry, coming down from Canada. Say hey, Kerry.
Hey.
There's this weird trend where everyone's starting to say, hey.
I'm going to get my butt kicked by the other guys.
No, you'll be fine. We got a special guest today, and we've got a really awesome episode. This may go down as my favorite episode besides episode 2, where we go over FOMO and burnout. But before that, Kerry and I would like to introduce clickbrix. Today we'll be calling him James. James has been a longtime collector. We actually met through a Facebook group, almost coming to blows. And he's now turned out to be one of my bestest pals in this community, and easily probably one of the most trusted sellers and buyers I've ever had to deal with. And for that reason is why he's on this show. So James, if you want to take a moment to introduce yourself, where you come from, what you collect, what you hope to do, and what you even want to do with this episode.
Thank you for having me on the show. And I'm glad we were able to tear and repair. So thanks for having me. It's an honor to do this. I'm really excited for it. I hope we, offer some practical information and, help people get rich quick with buying and selling customs. Just kind of quickly on how I got started. So actually my older brother introduced me to Brickmania back in like 2018. And I thought it was the coolest thing, right? Military Lego kits. And I saw some. And so I started joining some, Instagram group chats on military Lego, and people would sprinkle in pictures of customs. I think the V1 Captain America custom from LifeBrick got displayed in that chat, and I was just like instantly drawn to that. Just the intricacy of the pad printing, the designs, just how different it was from a Lego minifigure. I just became hooked on that, and that's pretty much the story ever since. So I collect Marvel figs, mostly from Jaka, Phoenix Customs, PCB, from L1 and 6 or Ling, Top Mountain, LCM, and a little bit of Christo too. Some Star Wars. I probably have one of the largest Handy Haro collections in the United States.
Which is actually impressive because they're hard to get a hold of.
Yeah, they're cool little, crafted figs. Definitely different. Definitely a different kind of theme, but I love them. So, and I like to buy and sell minifigs. I guess it's a hobby, and I kind of like the idea of making somebody happy when you get them a fig that they've been looking for.
Well, on my great quest to collect all these Spideys, there was a Handy Haro Iron Spider fig, which I basically just said never going to happen. And then out of nowhere, you were able to get me one. I really appreciate that because actually it is pretty cool.
Yeah, no problem. By the way, I know we're a few days removed from it, but I wanted to wish you a happy Veterans Day.
I appreciate it. Thank you. I made sure to take the day off.
Nice.
So, all right, the crux of this episode, we're calling it buying and selling until I think of something more clever before it goes to air. But I want to make it clear these are not hardline rules. These are like a pirate code. It's not really rules. It's more of a guideline. You're free to buy, sell, or trade in any manner you like. We're not judging. But if you do want to build a good reputation and be considered a trusted buyer and seller that can garner repeat business, we feel the information we're going to put forth and the tips that we're going to provide can help you get there. And one more time, just to make it clear, if we say something that reflects how you buy and sell and you feel that it's casted in a negative light, that's okay. That's on you. You do you. But if you want to do it in a way that people are like, oh, I want to buy and sell from that guy or gal, then we think that we've kind of figured it out. Between the three of us, I think we've got at least, 15 20 years of collecting. And that doesn't even include non-minifigure years. We're going to get into some general tips. We'll go into best practices for buying, selling, trading, shipping. And then also we'll go over the ideas and the concepts behind the secondhand markets. So we'll start with some general tips. And I think the number one tip we can all agree on is buyer beware, do your research. Kerry, would you agree?
I would agree 100%.
Would you like to expand on that?
No. Just kidding. Yeah, I mean, it's for myself, if normally what happens for me is like someone will share something in a chat and it's like, hey, this person's selling all this stuff. I bought from them before, like they're a good person. And normally they are. So luckily I have people doing that where I don't really buy from people I don't know if I haven't gotten a vouch for them.
A lot like the corporate world, you don't move around because of your resume, you move around because of your network. And and referrals always way higher than any sort of resume. I think the hobby world works in the same regard, in that if you build your network, which is something we've talked about in numerous episodes here, if you build your network and you get to know you, and you're not just sitting there with some like 20-digit profile name with no profile picture, count on lockdown, people will be more willing to trust you because they have someone else they can talk to. Think about when you're trying a new restaurant or a travel destination, or you're going to buy an appliance or something. The first thing you do is you go to your friends and family saying, do you have experience with this? Has anyone played this game before? You look at reviews, right? You go to Yelp, you go to Amazon. So it's no different when it comes to buying and selling from other collectors. You have to make sure that people want to give you a 5-star review.
There's been a situation where in the Geek Exchange, an excellent secondhand forum on Instagram.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Somebody put something up for sale, and I had it, right? And I was ready to reach out and say, hey, I've got this. I've probably got it for a decent price. Let's make it happen. And then when I've clicked on, the messenger, I see this thread, maybe from a previous attempt at a transaction. And it's like a reminder of how poorly that went, or they ghosted me or something, or it just went south in one way or another that would be difficult to move on from. And then that person misses out on an opportunity, right? When people, I think, engage with one another that way and kind of fail to develop trust, you miss opportunities because it's a small community. It's a tight-knit community. And as you said, word of mouth is everything. Networking is everything. And unfortunately, sometimes it takes just kind of, one sort of bad or sour event, and you might miss an opportunity or two. You're not going to miss every opportunity, but you might miss one or two.
You're absolutely right. And in our group chat, how many times have someone said, hey, has anybody dealt with this person before? And you get a show of hands saying, yes, no problems. Yes, no problems. And then sometimes we get that occasional person that's like, oh yeah, they'll string you along. They're going to ask you 20 questions. They're going to ask you for 30 photos of the fig. And then they're going to say, never mind. And they've done it to me 4 times. It's and if that sounds familiar, then you're the person. But no, but generally speaking, I think when it comes to trusting, doing your research, it also comes down to trusting your gut. If you're in the middle of a sale, don't get so caught up in the hype of making money or getting the fig that you've been desperately looking for that you ignore your gut feeling. If something doesn't feel right, there could be a reason for it. If you have principles or rules regarding, like, I just have a budget for this fig, I can't go any higher than this, stick to that. There are a lot of folks out there that love to haggle. And some of those that haggle don't even care about the item they're getting from you. They just want the feeling knowing they've gotten something that you don't want to give up. And I've dealt with this in bazaars overseas, in small towns where they go after tourists, or they go after, soldiers when I was deployed, and they want to know that they're getting your last dollar. That's all they care about. And so trust your gut and stick to your guns, because too often by playing it calm and cool, you'll come out on top. And if you don't, as we've said numerous times before, those figs will come around again. It's not a one and done opportunity. I don't know if either of you ever had experience like that, but I've had quite a few where, the buyer wanted to like suddenly change what the payment method was, or suddenly had a reason why they couldn't do it. And I don't know, it just didn't feel off. It wasn't a smooth transaction. And personally, I don't think you as a buyer or a seller owe anybody anything other than the respect of each other's time. And so don't feel pressure to make a deal because someone's, giving you shit.
Yeah, I've had experiences where, and I'm sure that folks in the audience will have this experience too. You're sort of engaging with somebody maybe new, or maybe you're new, and all of a sudden you're chatting on Facebook or Instagram, and they want to take it to email, or suddenly it's not really that person you're dealing with, it's maybe a friend of theirs, and all of a sudden the Hotmail email address comes through, and it's got all sorts of letters, cursors, symbols. It looks like a comic book swearing or something like that. And that's where, somebody's gut should kind of kick in and say, this is just getting a little dicey, even if it goes through, which probably it will. It's just kind of bizarre behavior when people try to obscure their identity that hard. I mean, I don't really totally understand that, kind of behavior where, somebody kind of needs to pass you through 3 or 4 different aliases before you can transact with them. And those always end up being, tough. Some of them go through, some of them definitely do not. But it always gives me kind of an uneasy feeling in my stomach, and I try to shy away from those situations. I prefer to just deal with what resembles a human being most of the time.
I think I'd try and pay you in iTunes gift cards.
I'm like sending Western Union money all of a sudden,
Okay, so going back to what you were saying, recently I did do a geek exchange, and for those who don't know, it's a secondhand market I do on Instagram. We'll cover it later in the program. I did what we call a geek spotlight, where I highlight one seller trying to sell a number of a high quantity of figs. I just focus on one individual, and we had a buyer come in that was willing to take the entire lot for an exorbitant amount of money. And this buyer is new to the hobby, no reputation, blank profile pic, account is private, all the red flags are there. And then, the payment was going to go to the person's secretary, not through him. I mean, all these red flags. I'll just, spoilers, it went through fine. But what I'm saying is the seller did his due diligence, regarding, worrying about chargeback scams. And he was, I don't know, he just did a lot of research regarding asking for proof of who it was, make sure it wasn't a hacked PayPal, got another form of social media that individual had set up, the secretary had set up, and got an email. So basically, he pulled a 2-factor authentication on the buyer. And it all came through. Sales happy. In fact, I referred 2 or 3 other people to this individual because, he's interested in buying, certain kinds of figs. And I think they've also made deals. But I thought that was a very sketchy situation at first. It was too exciting not to pass up. But I'm proud of the buyer for having done their due diligence and actually went deeper than I probably would have gone.
But it's important to keep ego out of these things too. You were giving an example before of just I suppose just some of the ways and some of the different methods people use when they're haggling, right? They want to get your last penny. They barely care about the sale. If you take your ego out of it and you just try to think of, what are you trying to accomplish with the transaction, right? You're trying to get a fig. You're dealing with somebody with a very different personality, perhaps, than yourself. If you just kind of stick to the high level cause, I'm trying to get a fig. I want to do it in a friendly way. We're part of this small community. No matter how different I am from this other human being on the other end of the line, we both share this pretty cool interest together, which is, this passion for custom Lego. And every time I remember that that's true about every single person I'm dealing with, it always allows me to get past like cultural differences, or even just kind of, I don't know, language barriers, or even just sort of differences in their motivations versus mine. Ultimately, we're doing something cool together, and I can be pretty patient with people when I remember that we're just, both into customs.
Yeah, it's funny you say you're very patient with people because I was used to respect. I still do respect. I'm gonna say used to. Sorry, but the fact that I notice when people start clowning you, you cut them off. You're like, I'm done. Not worth my time. And I love it. And I actually started adopting that myself for my own transactions because the guy said, he was interested, and then he just disappeared for like 6 hours. If you're here to make a deal, let's make a deal. That goes back to Kerry. There was a point you made during the note taking we were doing. Clear and timely communication is key.
Yeah. I mean, and also like think about it. Like, what would you want? Like, I don't know how to say what I'm thinking. I'm so brain dead right now. Like, what would you want from somebody you're buying from? Like, you should be doing the same thing. Like, I know a lot of people who are very communicative when they want something, and then if they're selling something, they like drop off, or it's just kind of like,
yeah, they put it out there, but then they don't answer any DMs for like 2 days.
Like, totally. Or like, yeah, if you're like in the middle of like talking about a deal and then one person just stops, like, I know life happens, but like, weren't we just talking? Like, what's going on?
Could you just put like BRB in the chat?
Yeah, like, oh, so like, yeah. And a lot, some people will and some people don't. It's like, oh, okay. But anyway, yes.
It's the golden rule, right? Do unto others as you would have them do to you.
Yes.
Like, treat people in general the way that you would want to be treated, and ultimately that usually helps cut through the ego too.
We're about to wrap up general tips because a lot of we're starting to spill over into the other things regarding buying and selling. But 2 points we did want to bring up was when you are part of a group, a selling group, whether it be on a Discord or a Facebook, if possible, and you're not sure about somebody, you can always look to see what kind of post history they have in that group. If there's someone that's been a member of that group for like 6 years and never posted, okay, well, maybe they're just a lurker and they only communicate through DMs when they're looking to buy something, right? They don't sell. Or if, wow, this guy's bickered a lot back and forth with people in the group, I don't think I want to deal with him. I know some Discords have channels for sub buyer and seller reputations where people can put compliments about great deals they had. I think that's really cool. Where they can also post like a billboard who to avoid.
Yeah, there's also scammer channels too.
Yeah, there's those scammer channels.
And they're helpful.
They are. And that's something that I think I mentioned. I don't know if I mentioned it in my episode 17 or the episode that I just recorded and I'm editing. But the biggest mistake that people can make, buyers, sellers, and brands alike, is assuming that we don't talk to each other. That's it. It's too simple. That's the t-shirt. It's some way or another, what you do with somebody else is not going to happen in a vacuum. It's not limited to that inbox. People are going to either share it by a screenshot or talk to somebody or whatever, but it's going to happen. And then the last thing that this kind of applies, I want to bring up in general tips because it kind of applies to buying and selling. But basically, we were talking about payment plans and holds. This goes back to trusting your gut and building your network. This is an expensive hobby, and we can't always be buying everything we want right away at 100%. If you know the buyer or the seller, and they say, hey, I get paid on Thursday, could you hold this for a few days? If I know that person, no problem. If I don't know you, man, I might give you 24 hours. If it's a hot item that I'm trying to sell. If it's something that's been sitting in my box of things to sell for like 2-3 weeks, you got all the time in the world, man. No one's asking for it, or it's about to be a giveaway on the Geek Exchange because I can't sell it. But if it's a hot item and everyone's asking me, I personally go through this. Again, we're spilling over. I personally go in the order of which the requests were received. So for holdovers and payments, I've actually commissioned somebody to make something for me. It's being built right now, and I said, let me pay you at least half up front. This way, I know you're invested in this, so you know that money's coming. You're not, because we've never dealt with each other before. But I offered half up front and half on completion. And all I asked for is time in the updates, which he's been very good at. I'll spoil it now. I'm having a custom Big Fig Spider Hulk being made, sculpted. So I'm really excited about it.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it.
What's the material?
I have no freaking clue.
Maybe like pure gold as far as
no, this is straight up
Most
custom
likely.
minifig. I can never pronounce the full name. I never pronounce these names out loud. I don't want to butcher it. But see, I told you we were going to deviate. Matos Forgery. Yeah, Forgery's in the name. Trust the guy. No, forge as in forging stuff, like forging iron. No, Matos Forgery. Quick side note plug. I shared some of his posts to my stories before, and I shared them amongst the handheld fig makers. This guy made those amazing hand sculptures.
That armadillo looks
Yeah, so
awesome.
this guy did a hand. I'll put this in the wrap up, even though it has nothing to do with buying and selling. But it's amazing, and he only has 269 followers, and it's ridiculous.
I have more than him. That's embarrassing.
But yeah, so those are our general tips. Communication, build your network, don't be a dick, trust your gut, stick to your rules. Pretty much what it all comes down to. Kerry or James, you have nothing else you'd like to add? I'd like to move into best practices in buying.
Let's move into it.
Let's do
All
it.
right. Number one rule, if you're not serious about buying, don't waste buyers' time.
Amen. Amen.
Yep.
And I put this in my notes. I quote, "It drives me nuts when someone asks me if something's still available. I respond within seconds and then get left on scene, or if I give the price, they don't check DMs for a day or two." That is the worst. Absolute worst. You are not the main character of your story, your own story. Or I'm not an NPC and you're what the fuck the metaphor is. I don't care. God damn it, answer your DMs.
Oh my God. In Facebook Marketplace, right? If you try to buy something, I think it's like an auto reply. Hi, is this still available? I mean, I can't stand it. I don't even want to respond to that anymore, right? It's just too obnoxious.
Well, because you're gonna get followed up with, can I buy for 50% of what you listed it for?
Yeah, correct.
But I mean, just don't engage unless you have the time to engage. And I understand if something gets listed for sale and it's like, oh shit, I've been looking for that part or that fig for a long time. I want to get in the queue, so to speak. Well, get in the queue, but then put aside a few minutes before your initial contact to talk to them, or say, going back to Kerry's point about communication, say, hey, look, I'm at my kid's soccer game, or I'm at a stoplight. Don't drive and text people. I'm at a stoplight, and I need to get this. I've been looking at this for forever. Can you please just hold it? I'll get back to you as soon as I get off work or get done with doing whatever, changing the baby diaper, whatever the hell you're doing. But just give them that heads up, talk to them, let them know what's going on if you're not going to be available.
Yeah, be predictable to some, just like you said, just how long would it take to write? Can we finish this in 30 minutes? Or, I'm going to be away from my keyboard for a little bit. I'll be right back. Right? Just set up some expectations for, returning to the chat. That seems fair to me.
Because if you have the time to be looking at this for sale thing, you're not immediately in the middle of something,
It's true.
So you could just be like, yo, I'll get back to you in like whenever time.
I mean, sometimes you get those DMs from friends saying, hey, I spotted this. This is something you wanted. And then, okay, that's a situation where I can see maybe you weren't apt to be scrolling around, but still, it just comes down to, just being courteous.
Yeah, and I'm sitting here listening to this and saying these things, and I'm wondering how many people listening to this are thinking, that prick never responds to me on time. Do as I say, not as I do, basically. Life is hard, life is busy. But we can probably all do a little better when it comes to just communication. Chat and instant messaging is hard because it's kind of not a simultaneous conversation. You're kind of communicating, at different paces. But just try to hurry it up, speed it along, and just respect the other person's time. They're busy too.
And one thing we haven't thought about is to be aware of the time zone differences you may be dealing with. And this goes as a buyer, as a seller. We should put this in journal tips. So yes, if you DM somebody saying, is this available? And they don't respond, but then realize that it might be 3 a.m. over there. If that's not the case, and you guys are both in the States or both in Europe or whatever, then I can see there should be some accommodation. But, if you don't know the time zones, like if you don't know that, Taiwan's 12 hours ahead of East Coast time, well, get educated, because these are things you need to know if you're going to survive in this hobby. So, as a buyer, I think, as Kerry said, looking if you're looking to see what you can buy, that must mean you're ready to also pay for it. If you can't pay for something, don't bother looking for it, because all you're going to do is generate heartbreak on yourself, and you're going to piss off the seller, who's trying to move merchandise. If it's one of those situations where it's like, oh, I can pay tomorrow morning, or I get paid on the 5th, can you wait till then? That's different. But if you're like, man, I'm barely making rent, first of all, you shouldn't be collecting minifigures. But if you're like, I'm barely getting by and I gotta choose between food or figs, you need to stop looking for sale posts. Unless you're creating a wish list for one day, maybe. But that's just for your mental health. I know I got maybe like 7 or 8 eBay alerts, right? And I turn those off from time to time, because I don't want to get hit with like, oh, my Grail fig popped up and I'm not in a position to take care of it. It's just going to bum me out.
How many people in this community don't know what they have? How would you possibly stumble into customs and then have no idea what the value of these products are? So like you said, what's the point of trying to like pursue like a charity deal or something, right? That's just not going to happen. Pretty much everybody in this hobby generally knows what these things are worth, because they paid for them at some point. They paid $80 for a Lego minifigure that's, beautiful and pad printed and custom done. So they're probably not going to sell it to you for $10 and, a pack of cigarettes or something. Which is actually worth probably far more than $10 these days.
So I've had some instances where there have been new collectors that come to me and they don't know the difference between UV or pad, and I'll show them like a screenshot on Tracy's site or a tier 1 saying, "No, look, you can see how much I paid for this. This is how much it's worth." And more often than not, I just get a look of shock, or like, "Oh my, I did not know." But I agree. Yeah, people should know what they're getting into, what they can expect. You can always go look at different retail sites that sell minifigures, or talk to resellers, saying, what do you think the going rate of this is, or ask your friends. So at least you can plan ahead, and I'm not, we were talking about haggling earlier. I mean, I don't haggle much, but there's nothing wrong with offering a counter price, as long as you're not insulting to the seller.
Yeah. And, I think that it's good to be expansive about what, or I should say restrictive about what insulting means, right? Somebody might make a pretty low offer, but then if you fail to keep engaging, you might not realize that they can come up pretty quickly. They can come up to pretty close to what you're looking for. And if you get within striking distance, go ahead and finalize the deal. I've had low offers. I've had low ball offers before, obviously. I just kind of counter back with what I think is reasonable. And sometimes those transactions work out just great. And, they were just kind of testing what they can do. Why would they pay more than they have to? I think that's perfectly reasonable. And, why would I sell it for any less than I think is reasonable? So just, have a broad idea of what that range is, and see if you guys can like strike gold together, with a sale. My point is, don't drop off too quickly from a transaction. Try to be reasonable about it, and just, be clear with what you're willing to sell it for. Don't drop the price too far just because they gave you a low offer, and don't get mad about it if they do.
I'm kind of spilling over into selling here, but so I want to take it back for a moment. As a buyer, it is a buyer beware market. So don't be afraid to ask questions like, well, can you take a picture of this or a picture of that? Picture you provided was kind of blurry or bad lighting, or I heard this particular minifigure had problems with the paint chipping off the hands, or I've heard some copies of this were printed on recycled parts. Is that the case here? I didn't have any accessories in your photo. Do you have all the accessories in the original packaging? These are all legit questions. You're giving up your hard-earned money to buy an expensive piece of property. So as a buyer, you do have your buyer's bill of rights, so to speak, where you should be able to ask those types of questions and get well informed before you decide. That being said, don't it's up to the seller to really do this, but don't get to the point of annoyance where you just start asking 1,000 questions or ask them all at once, or if they're questions that the buyer can't possibly know. It's not on the buyer to know how many people have owned this fig before him, or or how many times have you opened it, that kind of crap. But if you say, hey, was this a display? Did you play with it? Did you pose it a lot? Did you fig barf with this thing? But ask the questions, make sure all the parts are there. And this is where you have the negotiation room as a buyer. If it's like, oh yeah, I'm missing this one part that came with it, or there's this one part where, like, I don't know, say it's a life brick Wanda. Yeah, the headdress is chipped on the corners, chipped off the top or whatever. This is where you have the power now to start negotiating, saying, well, you're asking for this, but I'm receiving a damaged product. And if I were to buy it, I may have difficulty recouping my money later on because it's broken. You can sell broken figs. People sell broken stuff all the time, usually to people that are looking for random fig barf parts. Some people will not buy a fig unless it has that damn numbered card in there. And if you don't know what's supposed to be with a fig and you can't find a reference, ask somebody who might know. If you're like, if I don't know this, like if I was going to buy a Handy Haro fig, I would go to James and say, James, is this the complete picture here? Am I seeing everything that's supposed to come with this figure? Is there any known issues with this particular character that I didn't worry about? And then he can let me know, like, no, it's good, no problems, or you need to have a sword or whatever. And that helps me as a buyer make a more informed decision. I think the last thing we have is double checking your address, making sure they have your correct address. I personally have a Google Keep document that has all the addresses that I mail to most often. I'm sure this is where someone's going to like yell at me to get into pirate ship or anything like that to like store all these addresses. I still haven't signed up. I don't know why.
Stamps.com?
Stamps.com, whatever. Yeah. I need to just do it. You know how long it took me to start buying my padded envelopes in bulk, my boxes in bulk, rather than just buying them individually? I'm slow to the game in that regard. Make sure if you're buying from somebody that you bought from a number of times before, they may not know that if you moved, or they may not know that you're out of town or out of country for a while. And I held onto a box for somebody. Hey James, how's it going? Different James. I held on to a box for him for like 2 months, I think, before I shipped it out. So it's okay. It's just it's communicating. Man, it's always going to come back to communicating, I think.
Yeah, such a good point. I mean, yeah, but getting the address wrong is kind of a doozy, right? That really complicates the transaction in some really key ways. So it's one of those really kind of important conditions to get right. Make sure that the right address is communicated. And if you're using like PayPal, friends and family, and I'm sure we'll get into that later, but you have to send the address separately because it doesn't just automatically go through. And be aware of, like, if you're using PayPal goods and services, what address you have on file. It doesn't just magically know that you changed dorm rooms, at the University of Michigan or whatever. Make sure that you keep that stuff up to date so that your fig's not getting, your $200 fig's not getting shipped off to, I don't know, the freshman in A13 or something.
I've had people type their address to me in Instagram in a DM and send me the wrong address. Like they screwed up the zip code, or they screwed up the apartment number or the street. And like, how am I supposed to know? And there was one instance where there was a legit address somewhere across town on a street of a very similar name.
Oh no.
And somehow we managed to put a stop hold on the package, and he went and picked it up from that post office. But that was a hectic couple of days trying to make sure that didn't get delivered to the wrong house.
No fun for anybody. You don't get the new package in the mail, which actually you said is one of the main reasons people do this hobby. And that really did speak to me when you said that back in, I think it was 17. I can't remember.
Oh no, it was like I think it was FOMO episode. Yeah, I love getting packages in the mail. It's the best.
It's the reason I do this, I think.
I need to just set up a network of pen pals that send me empty boxes or something, so I feel like I'm getting something every day.
Be a lot cheaper.
Join a Jelly of the Month club or something. Kerry, did you have anything you want to add about buying?
I do. I would say as a buyer, when I get something, I always message a person and say, "Hey, I got your package.
Oh, good point.
Thank
Good
you."
point.
You don't have to say thank you, but like I've had people where I'm like, "Yo, did you get my thing? Like I sent it like a month ago." "Oh yeah, I got it." And it's like it's good to know international, like, because I always worry about stuff getting lost, and I'm not obviously gonna like track a package I send to somebody, but it's always good to just let someone know you got it.
Yeah, I mail a lot.
Because
Yeah, and I don't pay attention.
you'll for sure hear if they don't get it.
I mail a lot, and I don't. After it's out the door, I don't think about it anymore, and I just can't keep track of all that. I mean, I've got like a whole pile of customs forms and post office receipts and stuff, that showing that I sent things, but it is a nice courtesy, and we're not asking that you like, you don't have to take a picture and tag us in a Instagram story or anything.
No, yeah, just like a little message. It's like, got it.
Yeah.
Received.
To all the people who've shipped me figs and I never wrote to them after, I apologize.
Yeah,
and I will be
I'm
better based on Kerry's
specifically
advice.
talking to you.
I know.
I'm calling you out.
I feel like this is all a setup to catch me in a lie later on in the podcast. Or something.
That's
We're
why
gonna
you're
Chris
here.
Hansen you. Take
Oh,
a
boy.
seat, James. We're gonna talk about this minifigure. All right, so that pretty much wraps up buying. Really, a lot of the stuff I would hope would be common sense. In terms of selling, some of it may not be. This is where we're just gonna go into what would best work for the buyers from a seller perspective, and also what will save a seller a bunch of headaches moving forward. I would say the number one thing beyond communication is being honest. If a fig is missing a part, damage, not in the original case, missing that numbered card, put that in the photos or in the sales posting. Don't leave anything to the imagination. Don't let anyone be surprised when they get something in the mail. That's probably my number one, is being honest.
Can we normalize describing loose fitting parts? That absolutely goes to condition. And sometimes you can like spin the head, especially I get this with light brick. I see that quite a bit. You can like spin the hair.
Oh yeah,
on
their
the
hair is
top of it,
notoriously loose.
like, on the
Yeah,
top. And I'm, I'm like that. That's
except
really
for
hard to
Quicksilver.
display.
Quicksilver, the hair gets stuck.
That's the only one until it snaps, pretty much. Let's normalize talking about what is that, grip or clutch or something. It's important, and I think it has a lot to do with the condition of the fig. That matters to people who take photos and people who display. Always having the helmet off kilter is no fun.
If it's a situation where a fig's notorious for having a certain quirk to it, and it's not your fault, like you didn't like loosen that part accidentally or whatever, that's important to note. And if you need help proving that's up to the buyer to do their research. Or as a seller, you can sit there. I mean, as a seller, it's easy for you to sit there and say, "Yeah, my friend says it's loose too." But as a buyer, you need to find someone that you can trust to corroborate that. Okay, yes, that particular Iron Man figure, if you take the helmet off, the red on the mono head scratches right off or something. A lot of my figs, I don't even use a lot of the accessories, so I don't know how they would interact with them. So, for instance, I had gotten a Stiltman figure from Bob's Customs. Love Bob, great guy. However, there was a bit of a manufacturing issue with the helmet. He won't deny this. And the plastic that was used for the helmet, the antenna were very fragile. And so one of them broke in transit. So he sent me a replacement. So I've got a brand new Stiltman helmet. No problem, no fuss, no muss. It's still in the foam in the case. I haven't taken it out because I don't want to risk breaking that one too by accident. It looks good. It still looks great. I mean, I love it. I have it on display on the stilts in my case and everything. And I figure I'll take it out when I start taking photos of it. And if I do sell it, which I probably never will, but at least I can send that case with the new helmet saying, here's the situation. It's on you, man. If you break it.
Happened to mine too, by the way.
Oh, you're still banned? Oh
Yeah,
no.
true. Yeah, I threw some super glue on there and
Oh,
called
I
it a
think I
day.
saw you for sale post for that.
I think I
Yeah.
sold it.
Yeah. All right. So being honest, obviously, we said is important, but also we're asking people to be realistic. Right now, the second-hand market is really flooded. During times of pre-COVID times, it was hard to come by, and things were harder to come by. You could charge, 40, 50% up, markup. Nowadays, we had so many collectors come in, new brands, new figures, more brands doing up the same character or figure. There's really, you throw a stone, you're going to hit three minifigures. And so you can't be pricing things like you did 3 years ago. I've seen it. People are trying to charge like $250 for a figure that I'll be surprised if they get $80 for. And it's kind of comical. A lot of them are older collectors that just have it. The light bulb hasn't gone off, or they're like, "Well, these are old and no one, can find these anymore." Yeah, but that character's come out by like four other brands since. Nobody wants that old one anymore. They want the newer thing with the better accessories and the better mold and the fancier design. And so you've got to really kind of, just understand how subjective these prices can be from a supply and demand standpoint. And Citizen Brick in particular is pretty crazy. Kerry, if you want to expand on that one.
Oh, do I need to? It's everything with Citizen Brick. It's like as soon as there's like a website drop, you go on eBay and the stuff on site is on eBay for like triple. But even just like people reselling, say, a misprint fig, like people are just asking like ridiculous prices, and it's like I don't even know where it comes from. I think it's just people want to make a quick buck. Most of those people would have paid like retail for it, and now they're asking like quadruple million times more.
Do you feel that's from an inflated sense of worth, or do you feel that they're trying to prey on FOMO? Or both?
Both. Both, yeah, for sure.
All of the above.
But even like, I don't know, I've been fortunate enough to go to like a bunch of cons this last year. But even just going and picking something up for retail, I could never imagine like coming home and then selling it for like triple,
Yeah. Feels gross.
Yeah, it feels gross. But some people like being gross.
And some people don't mind feeding that gross habit. And again, we're not going to judge here other than saying it's gross.
I want to explain why flipping doesn't ultimately pay.
Can you hold that thought?
Yeah.
Or we have a whole section on flipping. But going back to selling, things to keep in mind when setting your prices. Wonder, is this a fig that everyone's selling? Or is this a character that's about to be released by another brand? I'll give you an example. I've got a Brothers figure, Hella, for sale. And there's another Hella that's just been announced to market coming soon that I've also purchased. So that's why I'm getting rid of my other one. I like this one better. Understanding that, I see that I'm not going to be able to get the price I would hope to get if there was not another Hella coming out, because a lot of people probably purchased the new one coming. So this could either be appealing to a completionist that wants a Brothers figure, or this is someone that just rather gets something that they feel is a little bit less expensive, or it's a little bit more simplistic and it's more Lego-like. They might that design aesthetic might appeal to them. But I'm not going to find just a regular hardcore customs collector able to just say pay the amount that I want, because they've probably already bought the other version that's coming out.
And for any number of reasons, collectible markets tend to work this way. Anybody who collects Pokemon cards, Magic the Gathering, comic books, there's a period of time immediately after release of a new product where the value is exceedingly high. And it stays that way for a little while. And then the rest of the market, catches up, new products are released. There's a new edition of from Wizards of the Coast with Magic the Gathering or something, and all of a sudden that's the shiny new thing. Okay. And so then it starts to really kind of deflate the value of this thing that you thought was worth so much more. And everybody just has to kind of appreciate that is the natural evolution of the collectible market. There will always be some figs that are just going to hold tremendous value. There are always going to be some comic books that hold tremendous value, and they will stand the test of time. But that is the rare exception for the most part, right? I think everybody's always going to get like $250 to $300 for, the PCB Ultimate Thunder, that's just always going to be worth a bunch of money, I think. But there are other figs that are just going to kind of trail off, and pricing your figs accordingly is important. If you don't want to sell it, price it for whatever you want. But if you actually want to complete a transaction, be reasonable, because the rest of us watching that, we'll tend to respect that more too. Like if we have a sense that somebody kind of understands the market and is pricing to the market, I don't know, that person just feels a little bit more trustworthy. It just feels like this is probably going to work out, and they have a pretty good sense of the market. They're probably mature in this hobby, and I'm more likely to engage with that person.
Yeah, no, well said. I guarantee folks are going to be trying to sell like a Jin Spider Punk probably for an exorbitant amount of money when it comes out, but it's not going to be worth. The value won't be nearly as high in a year or so until the next Spider-Verse movie comes out, and then it'll go up again, but then it will trail off again. So the custom figures really do kind of sometimes rely on the zeitgeist to see what is of value. Jeez, everybody loves some Breaking Bad figs. I think that's one of those sets of characters that will stand the test of time in terms of value, because there's such a love for that show. And the PCB Thunder, Ultimate Thunder, that's the Endgame Thor by PCB and GB. That thing went down in history as probably the first fig that sold out so damn fast and was notoriously hard to get a hold of, which is why it's still so valuable, because no one's selling it. And so, yeah, you can probably still net 350, 400 for that thing.
It'll go down in minifigure lore. Some of these are frankly bigger than they're bigger than the community. They expand into the wider zeitgeist of our culture, basically. How big was Citizen Brick after the President Zelensky fig was released? That thing that was in the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah, no, yeah, he was on international news stations. That unfortunately woke a sleeping giant of eBay opportunists.
Oh yeah,
that now invest in Citizen Brick, hoping to flip them just like they did this President Zelensky fig. But I think after a while they're going to realize it's not worth that type of investment. So we already talked about as a buyer, you should ask questions. As a seller, you should allow them to ask those questions. But if it does start getting out of hand, you feel like you're wasting your time, going back to trusting your gut, decide if this whole steal is even worth it, or if they're just stringing you along. I had an incident where someone was asking me about a fig, and then they were asking about parts of the fig and asking for close-up pictures, and they started telling me about their thoughts on the fig compared to this other brands. I'm like, look, man, I don't give a fuck about your philosophy about these figs. I just need to know if you're going to spend money on it or not, because I've got 2 other people in line asking about it, and I'm giving you the courtesy of being the first one to respond. And eventually they just kind of faded away and ghosted. But I really, like I said, I don't care what you think is the better figure compared to the one I'm selling. I don't care if you saw it cheaper or more expensive from somebody else months ago. I don't care if you once owned it and looking to add it to your collection. I really don't. I just need to know, is your money good? Is your money on time? And what's your address? That's it.
Yeah. Friendly banter is okay in like in a chat where you're trying to sell something or buy something. But like when they're trying to crap on your product just to try to squeeze like a lower price out of it, it never works on me. I know what I have, like most of us do. It just is not going to work. It doesn't convince me to lower it. It almost makes me think, but actually I'm going to charge 10% more now just to completely kill this thing.
Yeah, I'm going to charge you an asshole tax.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah,
there should be an asshole tax.
But I don't want to hear your pontifications about how that brand's fallen off and how their quality, or how you really wish it had side printing. Either you wish you had it in your hand or you don't.
Why are you trying to buy it if you hate it so
Exactly.
much?
It just comes across it
Going
comes
wrong?
across as like sour grapes, It's like, oh, I didn't want that fig anyway. Well then don't bother me. And this might be a shock because I'm usually very friendly in my DMs, but sometimes this is what's going on in my head.
You know, interestingly, like I'm 37, and there are times where I'm negotiating with somebody who might be 18 years old. And I do forget that sometimes. And I have kind of a whole life of experience of, just going to work, being in the business world, kind of engaging with people that way. And I think I get a little too quick with people who are younger and just trying to kind of, I guess, talk or chat in the way that they prefer to chat. And I need to be a little bit less grumpy, I think, myself. That being said, some people are just assholes, and that's just how it is. Just because they have a lot of money to buy figs, it doesn't make them any less an asshole
Yeah,
too.
it's a learning experience for everybody involved. It is a chance for us as older individuals to educate those who may not have, those nuances mastered yet. But if you're going to come at me with incomplete sentences and busted grammar and I can't make out what you're saying, I don't have time to break out the Dead Sea Scrolls to figure out what the fuck you're trying to say. So if you want to Rosetta Stone your ass over to Google and translate that stuff, great. But if English isn't your first language, that's totally different. I'll work with you.
Yeah.
I will reduce the amount of words I use in my sentences. I will be very abrupt and short and monosyllabic in the words I choose to make sure it's as, this is going to sound insulting. I will speak at like a third grade level to make sure that things are quite clear, terms are set. And I've gotten compliments about doing that for those who do struggle with their English sometimes. I know I'm sitting here, ranting and cursing or whatever, but it's subjective. It's a case by case scenario. But generally speaking, it's the people that it's like they're in a chat and they just want to show to me how much they know about customs. And I don't care to know. I'm trying to sell something. And the reason why I get upset is because, again, as a seller, I personally, I work the situation where first come, first serve. I don't play a game where I'm navigating multiple chats for the same figure for sale. I don't think that's right. I'm not personally a fan of it. Again, folks, you do you. I don't prescribe to that scenario. If you're talking to me about things that don't matter, you are either preventing me from making a sale from somebody who is going to buy it, or you're frustrating people that are waiting for me to get back to them. When I said, hey, somebody else is looking, I'll let you know if they commit or not. And that's where I get irritated.
Yeah.
It's like I don't want to be unfair to the people that are waiting in line, and I want to be respectful of their time, and I don't want to waste all my time with somebody who's ultimately not interested.
Yeah, there's a time and place, and if somebody wants to chat figs, I'm always down. Just
Absolutely.
send me a DM at clickbrix. But like during a transaction, right? Like that's why we posted it. That's why we took pictures. That's why we set a price. And ultimately you're trying to sell something. There's a little bit of money involved. Let's just talk about the transaction. A little side convo about how cool the fig is, this and that. But ultimately, let's just kind of keep the momentum going toward either a sale or not a sale, which is just as good. It's still creating a conclusion, to the sale or transaction. Then you can move on to that next person in line. And I think it's pretty great that you do go in that order. I agree with you that just spiking out a price to 16 people and just seeing who gets back to you just leads to a lot of broken hearts that are unnecessary. So I think the way that you're describing it is the right way to do it. I think it's good. I think it's fine if we kind of assign values to some of these different ways of doing things. Ultimately, the point of this is to help people do a better job buying and selling and kind of, just increasing their I don't know, their social score in the community. And this is how you do it, by listening to us.
Yeah. The next few points are centered around the don't be a prick philosophy. DM games, I guess is what we were calling it earlier. I think the easiest way to avoid those broken hearts, as you said, yes, in the order of which it was received, is ultimately up to the buyer to make, or the seller to make that decision. But the one thing Kerry, I'd like you to talk to this is when you have a deal about made, don't go looking for higher offers elsewhere. Okay, you've had experience with that before, right?
I have. I hate to admit, but I've actually been the person. I've been that person where I'm like, I'll give you this much more for
Get
it.
off the damn podcast.
Like I did it once, and I was
me.
just like, oh, I was like, oh man, I feel like a dick. But the seller didn't go for it, and I was like, I'm glad he didn't, because that was a dick move. But yes, sorry. Cut that.
I'll keep it.
I want to be honest. It's not something I've only done it once.
Well, yeah.
I think.
Let me. I don't want to villainize. I don't want to demonize anybody who's done it. I understand it comes from a place of FOMO, and we've already talked about how FOMO is a demon that can really make you make stupid decisions on how you spend your money, and ultimately, it's up to the seller to accept that offer, right? So everybody and their mom can hustle in saying, I'll give you 2 times that, 3 times that, whatever. I'll throw in this and this if you sell that to me. It really doesn't matter if you do it or not. It really comes down to the seller accepting those terms. And my advice to the sellers is not do that, because, again, word will get around who got what and how they got it. And you don't want to be the person they talk about. Everybody knows a prick in their life or an asshole. And if I ask the audience right now, think of somebody in your social circle that really just annoys everybody. You automatically are going to have someone that comes to mind. Don't be that person.
Okay. Wow.
But
I've also been on the receiving end where it's
that's why I started talking to you, because I thought you were on the receiving end.
But I just wanted to let you know I can be a dick
I appreciate it. Still love you.
You're welcome. Oh, thanks. But yeah, no, I've had that before too, where I've like reached a deal and then it's like, actually, this person just offered me more, so like, see you later. Yeah, you don't forget that, and you don't like not tell people about that. So
worse than somebody coming in offering other offers, a higher offer, is lying that somebody has just DM'd you with a higher offer.
Oh.
And I've had to deal with that before.
Yeah.
Buying a fig, which I know damn well nobody had interest in. It was a very obscure niche character that was important to me. And I've dealt with this individual before. Oh, and he pulls it every single time. And I stood firm and I got what I wanted. But yeah, every single time I bought like 3 figs from this person, and I don't think they remember each time that they've talked to me. So they do the same trick every time. They're like, oh, well, I got like 2 other offers. I'm like, okay. Well, I was like, well, this is my price. Okay, now comes, oh, let me go back to you. Okay, this other guy offered this. What was the other offer? Can you match it? I'm like, no, I can't. This is what I got. And I can go up like $5. That's all I can do right now. And I generally win. But it was just funny because this individual has done this to like 5 or 6 other people, and it's almost a joke where we expect it, and people just don't want to buy from him anymore. He always has his stuff higher priced than normal anyway, but it was such a niche fig. It was a grail fig for me, which is why I was going through it.
And why do people want to be in this, in this game for 10 minutes instead of 10 years? So he made some extra money on that transaction. How many other opportunities are lost because of that method of negotiating, right? There's just something, it's yucky, right? It doesn't feel like kind of transparent negotiation.
No, it's a transactional relationship, and it's all about what can I get from this. And I feel that I'm not going to say a lack of empathy, because that indicates they're just a bad person. I just think there's a lack of awareness beyond the transaction. I don't know how to phrase it properly, but they're not thinking bigger picture. They're just thinking of that one. Like, some of these folks just like the art of the game, the art of the deal. They just like the idea of haggling and making things happen. And I think there's a human element to it that gets lost, that gets forgotten. And personally, I would feel happier selling a fig at a lower price to someone that I knew that really appreciated it than I would making money off of somebody because I felt that I, just suckered somebody that didn't know any better. Does that make sense? That's just how I operate.
Yeah.
I'm not a saint by
Yeah.
any means. Don't get me wrong. I'm not above anybody else. I am definitely not a perfect person. But, I just feel that for some folks, they just like the deal. Like I've got friends that I've known for years, and as soon as I start talking to them about a deal, it's like we've never met before, and they're like their eyes glaze over, and it's about what can I get from you?
The
Yeah,
board.
it's like what can I get? My stuff's great, your stuff's shit. What can we do here? How are we gonna make this happen? I'm here like, hey man, I'll give you some buddy prices because I've known you for a while. Maybe I'm just old and a big softy. I don't know.
No, I think you're just not two different people. There's not on stage bread and off stage bread.
Yeah,
It's just you.
What are your thoughts on the when people post the fig and they say DM me for offers? What do you guys think about that?
Here's what I think about that. I think that whichever party initiated the transaction should indicate the price. So if someone's seeking a fig, they should communicate their price range, right? I'm looking for this. I'm willing to pay this. I know that's a little less usual, but I think it's better. If someone is selling a fig, I think they should clearly list the price, right? So that's how I think. I wish all the transactions kind of work that way because, kind of publicizing the price is kind of where negotiations start. And so it's an important part of a trade or a sale. And so I just think there should be obligation on whoever is kind of initiating this situation, list the price. If you put something on eBay, you got to have a price. If you list something for sale on Craigslist, you got to have a price. I think that should be normal in the community too.
I don't love it just because I know that whatever, like if it's something I want to pursue, I know that anything I say is something that'll come back with oh, well, I have a higher offer. Not from friends, but people I don't really know. I think some people use it to kind of just inflate the price. Does that make sense? So I don't love it, but I also I don't I'm not saying it's a shitty practice, but like you said, giving someone an idea of the range you're after and then going from there is a lot better.
I'm not a fan either. However, I will be fair in saying that some people do that because they have no idea what they're selling is worth or what they can get for it. They don't know the current market value. That being said, there's no thing stopping a seller from shopping around saying, hey guys, what do you think this is worth? How much should I put it up for? And then coming up with a price. I think anybody who puts something up for sale does have some sort of range they've already aware of that they want. If you're not, that's not really a smart move at all. I'm sorry. If you have no clue about what it's worth, if I offer you $5, that should be just as good as anyone who offers you $500. But I think I'm not a fan of it. I generally avoid those sales posts all the time. I never engage because I don't want to insult their intelligence, because if I don't know as a buyer, if I don't know what it's worth, I don't want to risk souring the transaction from the start by lowballing unintentionally. So I think it's muddy waters I don't like to get into.
I've done it once or twice, kind of just being lazy too. I had 5 or 6 figs and I was like, I just didn't want to sit there and type out the price in a Facebook group. And I was like, here's what I got. I think I wrote, I'll list the prices later. Just let me know if you want.
This is becoming the hypocrisy episode. Everything I'm talking about.
We're all monsters.
We're human.
It's coming out.
It's rare.
There are Facebook groups out there that make it a requirement that every post must list a price, which I'm really a fan of, and I think that's why they're the more popular ones. I had a request as recently as this week asking if I could start requiring the Geek Exchange, start requiring prices on listings on the Geek Exchange. I said no, and the reason being is because that is such a frantic event for me. where I'm literally on my phone 12 hours, just tackling DMs, downloading photos, swiping, creating stories, typing names, or trying to remember the name that would just send me that photo, trying to remember the right color background for buy, sell, or trade. There's so much going on, plus all the side DMs, plus trying to zero out my inbox because then people start liking what I said, the story I tagged them in, or resharing the story, which that makes me think I have a new DM to answer, but it's just another unread notification. It's really chaotic, and it would severely slow down the rate in which things are posted if I had to go back and train everybody. Okay, you finally did a collage. Now can you go back and add the prices, please? Some folks, believe it or not, are not that tech savvy, even though they're on Instagram. And I have to work with them to find a collage app for their mobile device, or how to make a collage so that I'm not downloading 6 photos and trying to like place 6 photos in an IG story. I can just place one. That cuts a lot of time for me, and I'm really grateful for everyone that does that. When they come to me, and if I say no, now you got to add a price, it's just more back and forth. It just becomes a bottleneck and slows everything down. I can understand the annoyance of having to check with people, find out the price, and then find out it's like out of your price range or whatever. But it also could be a wake up call for folks that are asking bad prices when they get 7 bites and everyone walks away because they're not interested from your pricing. Or it could spur a conversation between 2 strangers that may follow each other that never talked before. So there's some good to it, but from a logistical standpoint, it's just not practical for me to ask for prices on the Geek Exchange.
I think if people generally start to move more in the directions that we're suggesting, that's a good thing. There's no perfect solution to all of this. There are just so many personalities in this game, and just so many different ways of doing things. In the Geek Exchange, you have a lot of trades. You have a lot of people selling packages, and it's hard to price out, at that speed, as you're saying. So that's totally reasonable. But this is an opportunity to just kind of express some reasonable norms, for people who enjoy doing this and maybe have a collection that they want to whittle down. And I think people will benefit from some of this debate.
So you had an interesting note here on the script we were trying to put together for this episode. You were talking about when closing out a sale. Do you want to touch on that real quick? About the fig being no longer available?
Yeah. So the theme here is clearly that, communication is key. And I think if you list something for sale, whether that's on a Facebook group or on your own Instagram story or, in the Geek Exchange, like if you make the sale, please go back and close out all those listings that you have open, right? Close it out. And then anybody who you're kind of negotiating with or communicating with, let them know that the fig has been sold, right? They'll appreciate it, right? They'll be heartbroken for a minute, especially if it's something they were really looking for, but they'll appreciate that instead of just getting ghosted and not really knowing what happened. Was it something I said? And then I think the people who are like hosting that forum where you were selling the fig, they'll appreciate it too. So they don't start getting DMs from, customers saying, hey, I can't get in touch with this guy who's selling this fig. He's not writing back to me. Like, don't create all that confusion. Just kind of, clean up your mess, right? When you get home from work, put your shoes away, put your coat away. And when you finish selling a fig, just clean up the mess that you've left with all the listings that you've made.
Okay, so here, boom. Now we got a trifecta. I am guilty of that. But it becomes down to, it was my IG stories. I had 2 figs in my IG stories that 2 days ago I deleted because I forgot that I had sold them. Because my story highlights, because I don't really use my highlights all that often. And I realized I had my sale things in there, and I was like, oh crap, I sold that last week. Gotta get rid of it. So now there's my fault. I feel better now. We're 3-0 and being shitty people.
Oh, wow.
I don't know. That was a pretty soft one there, Brett.
I'll take what I can get, I guess. So just for you folks that are a little behind the scenes here on how podcasts are created, or at least how this podcast is created, quite often a few days prior, sometimes up to a week or so prior, I start taking notes about what I want to talk about, trying to craft that narrative, and then I bounce it off to the co-host who provides their notes. And in this case, I also sent it to James as the guest, because I want to, hear his insights coming on as sort of a sales, I won't call him a subject matter expert, but someone who I felt always had a good, bit of knowledge on how to express himself in this arena. And one of the notes you put in here, James, stood out to me, and this goes to selling, and I really think this is important. So I'm going to let you talk to it about helping people out. So can you know which one I'm talking about, right?
I do, yeah. And I made this note. I made this note because I've experienced this, and so I've sold quite a few times, and I like it. I enjoy it. It's a way that I can kind of keep affording, newer products and kind of seeing the cool new stuff this market has to offer, this hobby has to offer. And there have been times where I've engaged with people who really do seem to be struggling to pay for a product that they want. It's like they'll almost pay any price for it, but then when it comes to actually making the payment, they're delayed and they eventually come through, but it just seems like it's a struggle for them. And as with any, hobby, especially when it comes to collecting, there can be people who engage in this who get addicted to this. And I think it's important, if you care about the people in this community, to keep an eye on, addictive behaviors. And if somebody is really struggling to pay you, or they're persistently asking to set up payment plans, not once or twice, but like constantly, and you just kind of get this feeling that they're struggling to make this payment, or maybe they're even talking about how difficult it is for them to make the payment, like they're just completely transparent about it. Just be attentive to that, and maybe steer clear of payment plans for that person. Don't do that, and encourage them to slow down, but do it in an empathetic way, right? Don't assume anything, but just be cognizant of that, and maybe kind of slow down the trades and transactions with them if you can do so. Yeah, you could probably make a buck on that situation, but it's really potentially hurting that person. And it's easy to argue, well, they're doing it to themselves and you're just, providing a product. It's easy to do that. It's easy to kind of rationalize it that way. But ultimately, just be attentive to it, and maybe make a suggestion that they kind of slow down, or this fig isn't that great. They're coming out with a new version of this, maybe don't invest that kind of money in it. I want to give credit to a transaction that I was kind of working on this evening with somebody selling something on the Facebook page. They put something for sale. I wanted it, pretty high price. He wrote back, "Hey, it's still available. Some people mentioned that this is going to be restocked soon. Do you want to just wait for that?" I mean, what an amazing message to come from this person who could have just had the funds. That's the kind of thing that is going to immediately ingratiate that person with me, and I hope to work with them many times in the future. So keep an eye out for your neighbor, I suppose, because this hobby does lend itself to some of those same problems that people face in other areas of life, such as with gambling or other kinds of addictive behavior that might come about.
Yeah, well said. And I'm really glad you brought that one up. And this this is why I pass around the notes to make sure we cover everything. So if you get anything out of this, besides, communicate and don't be a prick, look out for your neighbors. You know, 3 tenets of this episode. That being said, we're gonna go from nice to talking shit. We're gonna talk about we're gonna talk about
Let's
we're
go.
gonna talk about the art of flipping and buying of multiples of product. Personally, I'm not a fan of this. I know it's popular in some circles, as they call it, trade bait, and I don't think that's a bad thing in that sense. If you're trying to buy items, I don't. How should I put this? I don't think it's bad to buy trade bait, because it's something that if you want for yourself, but you think, oh, if I had to give it up, if I needed something, some collateral to sweeten a deal, maybe I can give this part up. That's cool and all, but buying things you have zero interest in just so you can flip it later. And I understand that's just capitalism. That's just, how making money works and the laws of supply and demand, but it doesn't mean I have to like it. And, I've had conversations with other collectors where they're like, yeah, I bought 3 of those. I'm like, well, why? Why'd you buy 3 of those? Oh, because it wasn't because they wanted to display it different ways because it has all these accessories or looks. It wasn't because they had a friend or a family member that wanted one, they was told, oh, because if this way people miss the sale, I can sell it to them later. Well, motherfucker, they may miss the sale because you just bought out the stock.
Right.
so so I
Cool.
yeah, it's I've bought multiples of things, but guess what? They're all sitting on my shelf. And because I either want to support the brand or again, they were different looks. I think we were talking before we started recording about I own two PCB Gladiator Thors because I want one that the armor and I want one with the end of the movie look with the eye taken out and stuff. Sometimes I get overzealous and I'll buy multiples to support a brand because I just love the character or the fig, and I'm desperate to like raise some funds for some other figs, and I'll get rid of my extras. But it was never bought with that intention. Again, you do you. I'm just saying it's a good way to like annoy people and earn a negative reputation or a social score, as you said earlier, by doing that practice. Brick Fair, Virginia, I think was the first time it really came into the limelight, like hardcore, where there were folks that were standing in line, grabbing all the CB they can, and putting it on eBay that night. And we had customers sitting there saying, "Hey Joe, do you know this is going on?" I mean, it went straight up to Joe. And of course, Joe can't do anything about it. He's just selling figs. It's not his problem to deal with. But whatever sob story these people give him, he's just like, I put it on the shelf, people pick it up and they buy it. So that's not by any means he said not to blame at all for this. But at the same time, it was so great when those prisoner figs were gone, and suddenly they were up for like $100 each on eBay. And Joe was kind enough to say, "No, I got plenty back at the shop. They're just not here." And so everyone started going online in their stories saying, "Don't spend this money. Don't buy this listing. This is going to be back on the website." Da, da, da. That was great. I loved it. It's watching the whole community come together. I get, some people's income, like they use the hobby to pay for the hobby, right? I get that. I don't know the answer to that on how not to do that. I really don't. I don't know how to intelligently comment on that, to be honest with you. I just know that buying to flip, I think, is personally gross. And you earn a reputation, and it's never a positive one. I don't know if anybody else wants to chime in on that one.
Well, speaking of Brick Fair, like, there was that one person who did buy a lot of stuff, and they still have it because all they did was go and post it for like double, like, sorry, not even
triple
double,
and quadruple,
like a $25 fig for like $200 all over eBay, all over Instagram. They made like multiple accounts, and because the community was like sticking together, that guy still has all that shit. When was Brick Fair?
August. It's now December.
Yeah.
Or November, excuse me.
Like it's not working.
Nope.
Get another job.
I think you're spot on. I think that's probably the answer. The secondhand market is huge, but the prices aren't as nuts as they used to be. And I think there's a case to be made that it's just not effective to try to flip. And I'm going to try to make that case. So let's do the math for a moment. Let's say that let's use an LCM Bagels fig, right? I've sold one or two of those higher than retail. And let's say that the fig costs, I don't know, $100. And you see it going for sale for $200 in different places. Let's use eBay as an example. So you buy the fig for $100. You're probably going to pay like $20 for shipping, something like that, right? And if you're buying multiple, well, that kind of reduces the per unit shipping rate, but it doesn't eliminate it. And then you're probably paying some kind of a credit card transaction fee or some kind of a currency transaction fee, right? So there's a little bit of an extra tax on that too. It takes months for you to get that one, finally arrives in the mail, and now it's time to flip it, right? So if you put it on eBay is going to charge you a 14% total transaction fee, and that is going to be not only on the auction value or the listing value, but also on the the shipping that's paid, as well as the sales tax that the buyer has to pay. So right now you're probably in like 125 on that fig, and now you've just added an additional 14% cut to eBay for that transaction, and the buyer negotiated down from 200 because they have to pay sales tax on eBay, and which is not true in many other better forums. So you've made a little bit of money on this fig, and now you go off to ship it, you put it in a box, you send it off, and you hope that it doesn't get lost in the mail. Because if it gets lost in the mail, you've essentially lost the profit margin on that fig, plus like the next 3 that you try to flip, because that's how expensive it is to lose an item in the mail. And then on top of all that, eBay is going to notify the IRS of this transaction. So you're also going to have to pay income tax on the sale of that product. And there are ways that you only have to pay the income tax on the actual income portion of it, meaning you don't pay income tax on the full sale value, but rather just on the part of it that was, I guess, profit. But that's complicated, and you might need an accountant for that. I just think at the end of this whole thing, you've tried to flip this fig, you've made almost nothing, and you've put yourself at a degree of risk by potentially losing that package in the mail, especially if you're sending it overseas or something. It just doesn't feel like it's worth it. And that takes a lot of time. I mean, everything I just described is a really time-consuming process. Just packing up a fig, shipping out the label, packaging it the way that, Brett recommends, with the box, with cushioning, everything like that. It takes a lot of time. And I kind of feel like your time is worth money too. So I just don't think the economics of this work, even if you're literally seeing a fig selling for like double the amount that it's being offered for sale at the original retailer.
Yeah, that just sounds like so much work. I just would you say that, so I don't know the inner workings of Whatnot, but would you say that it's comparable to eBay in terms of the cuts that are taken and all the efforts that go through? Because the FOMO of a live auction hits hard, and I've seen some crazy shit on Whatnot. I've seen some really, I've seen $30 figs going for like $150 on Whatnot because people just get rabid about wanting it and not understanding that it's not that special.
I've never used Whatnot, but I guess I would just, so I don't know how to answer that.
It's basically eBay Live.
Okay.
It's it's just too much work, and I'm too lazy. And more importantly, like you said, time is money, and I don't have a lot of time for that at all.
I mean, you've taken the opportunity away from somebody who wanted that fig so that you could waste your time to make $20. That it just doesn't add up.
Well, I don't know the threshold of,
anyway.
You mentioned Baggles figs, which can go to like exorbitant amounts of money. I mean, what was it like? I think Marcus sold his for like 200 or 300, and someone told him he should have sold it for 700. So I think there's probably some sort of threshold that hits where it is worth the time because you can get that much money. But the gamble, such as what Kerry mentioned about Brick Fair, trying to sell $25 in parts for like $100 at 4 times markup, the product itself visually doesn't even look like it demands that much, value. So you'll be hard pressed to make that money back.
Yeah, and anybody who wants to do this at some kind of scale, like if they just want to try to make money flipping, it is going to be a gamble. There are going to be situations where a product sells out, but just because something sells out, it doesn't mean that it's going to be worth more than retail on the secondhand market. There's just a lot of time that passes between when a fig is released and when it ships. And in that interim, there's a lot of other cool stuff that comes out. There's a lot of other ways that people invest their money. So it ends up being a gamble. And every time you hit a jackpot, right, there's going to be 10 other situations where you can't even move the thing. So it just doesn't make economic sense.
Do you think it goes back to addiction and gambling and liking the risk and wanting to take the risk? It's like people that go around and bid on, storage units, hoping to get something magical inside.
Oh my God.
I love that show.
But it's similar, is it not? You're taking a risk, you're spending money, and there's no guarantee that there's anything inside or anything's going to, the deal's going to be good. Or
I would imagine it is like that. I don't really, I don't really know the personality of people who who would enjoy doing that and spending all that time, but it must be because economically it doesn't actually make sense. And it does create a situation where people miss out on figs so that you can kind of feed that emotion or something. So again, it's ethically dubious at best. It doesn't work. And I think people should stop doing it.
Understanding how that dopamine hit, I bet you it cannot work 9 times, but if it works that one time, that 10th time, it makes you forget about all the times it didn't work. And that's just human nature. I mean, obviously it's working for some people because there are folks that are on Whatnot selling all the time. So I'm not going to say there's not an audience for it. We can sit there and, bash it all we want. There's an audience for it because people are feeding into it. But I think as people get older and wiser in the hobby, I think they'll be less susceptible to it because nobody's been collecting a minute is going to pay $100 for a donut head figure from Brick Fair. Nobody. If you're new and you don't know and you hear all these magic words like custom and pad printed and
limited edition,
limited to how many you can sell, injection molded, and all this stuff, you hear all these words and you don't know any better, well, then and honestly, some sellers just have money to burn where they don't have to think twice about spending cash. So then people are looking for those whales. All right, well, that's enough about that. But going back into your math, which, damn it, I think I made an earlier claim I would never let math be on my podcast, but you went and did it. So we're going to go into it some more. And so we've gone over the general tips: buying, selling, flipping, buying multiples, all things that involve money and math, as James has helped us with. We're going to talk about PayPal because there's been a growing trend of people asking for friends and family versus goods and services. People that want to buy want to do goods and services for that buyer protection, while it's people who want to sell want to do friends and family to avoid the fees. And again, James, I'd love for you to talk about this for a little bit because I think you summarized it best in an earlier DM conversation we had. And you're the guest, so you can do the most talking.
Thank you. That sounds great.
Well, this subject came up because of you. This episode came up because of our conversation about this particular subject. So that's why I want to make sure that it's given justice, and I think you can articulate it far better than I can.
So just to be clear, what we're talking about is the kind of IRS rules around income, or are we talking about just the norms with PayPal?
I would say everything. Okay, so I'll do the norms in that basically there are 2 options for most. Some countries do not allow for friends and family, such as like Singapore. However, when you do friends and family, it's basically, for those who don't know, it's like basically you're giving money to a buddy, right? There's no real PayPal fees. You want to give him $10, you give him $10, he gets $10. If it's goods and services, that's when it's treated like you're buying something. And then so PayPal starts putting in these additional fees. For those who are curious about what those fees are, you can always go to sites like PayPal Calculator or Fee Calculator. Just Google PayPal Calculator. There's like 1,001 sites, and you put in the amount, and then it'll say, if you want this much money, ask for this. If you want you need to pay someone this money, do this. And it helps you. If you've ever done a deal with me, I always give people 2 prices based on which method they want to use. I've also prefer friends and family because of the fees involved and the IRS situation, which we'll talk about in a moment. The reason why buyers like goods and services is because buyers then get what we call buyer protection. If they feel like they've been scammed or you have them shipped at a decent amount of time, they can file PayPal claims and get their money back. Or, as a seller, goods and services can suck because there are bad buyers out there that will try to put out claims saying, well, I never received it, so I'm going to put a claim in. Whether damn well they did get it in their inbox. Those are very easy to fight. All you need to do is, which we'll go into how in the shipping section, but goods and services basically provides both parties a legal means to renege on that transaction and get monies returned to those who gave it. Friends and family, just like hooking up a buddy.
Yeah. So with goods and services, I would always recommend, like, the first time that you're transacting with somebody, or you're shipping internationally, like, I would always recommend goods and services in certain situations because of that protection it does offer through PayPal. The reason I like friends and family, and the reason why sometimes in my sale listings I've indicated I only prefer friends and family, is because it is just sort of like handing cash to a friend or colleague or family member. It's, as part of the transaction, it doesn't even communicate the address of the other person, because PayPal is basically assuming you already know it because they're friends and family. What I think is important to know now is that what has happened recently is that there's this form called the 1099-K in the United States. In the IRS code, it's 1099-K. And what this means is that basically these third-party payment platforms like PayPal or eBay, the way that they process transactions, or Venmo, or any of these other payment processing services, Square, Stripe, all those, they report to the IRS any transactions that have occurred in excess of $600 on their platforms, right? And so the IRS receives notice that you, via your social security number, have transacted over $600 on that platform. And let me be clear that it has always been the law, and it has always been the case, that you have to report all of your income to the IRS, right, during tax season. So that's always been the law. But normally, prior to this, the threshold was much higher. It was like $20,000 or something like that. The IRS wasn't really paying attention to some of these smaller transactions, sort of these hobbyist transactions, but they are now. And so each person who's receiving over $600 on these platforms, there's going to be a 1099-K that's filed with the IRS on behalf of the third-party payment transactor. And so you have to be really careful that you're reporting that to the IRS when you do your taxes. And as I mentioned earlier, you don't actually have to pay income tax on the gross amount of the sale, meaning the total amount of the sale. You can file your taxes in such a way that you're essentially accounting for the expense that you incurred purchasing that fig in the first place. So that, in other words, the only true income or true profit that you've accumulated from the sale of that fig is just the difference between what you paid and then what you received. But honestly, it's complicated to do that. And if you're going to do that, you might even consider getting an accountant to help you with that if you're kind of doing this pretty frequently. And so most people will probably just end up saying, I had income of all these fig sales that I did, and you're going to pay income tax on that. And of course, it depends on your total income and your tax bracket, but you still have to realize that the total cost of your expenses when you're using goods and services or Venmo or something like that, it's not just the transaction itself and what you get paid from the person who's buying and whatever PayPal fees get sucked out. You're also going to be responsible for reporting that on your taxes at the end of the year. It's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, what he said.
Yeah.
I'm all about, protecting your own butt when doing a transaction with someone you've never worked with before, or trying to ease concerns of someone who's buying from you. I get that. But yeah, overall, friends and family is better, only because then you don't have to pay for it again. You're not paying fees on what you've just earned money on by selling a fig. Because I know I am not going to keep a record of every fig I've bought from a website or through PayPal, and then just so I can spend the difference on what I've sold something for to prove that, well, I bought this for this retail price, but I only sold it for 20% more, so I should only pay taxes on the 20%. That's just too much work.
Are you going to speed that up to like 300% when you do the podcast? You probably
That's going to put people to sleep. Yeah. Well, I promise that's all I had to say about goods and family, goods and services, and family and friends for PayPal.
I think it's important to know why people want friends and family versus goods and services. It's tricky because, it's like you want to be protected as the buyer. But I will say, when you're doing international transactions, like friends and family, you do have to pay a fee. It's not a lot, but
you could add that to the overall cost
of
the fig to cover it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like $5 or something. It's like
it's cheaper than shipping it. to Canada.
I think it's less than $5, but yeah, that's true.
All right. So no more money talk. No more math. We're going to get into trading.
Whew. Okay.
And Kerry, this is your time to
Oh.
shine.
Oh my
Yeah,
god.
so the reason why Kerry's on this episode because she has far more experience than I do in trading on the pros and cons, and especially being so entrenched in the citizen brick world where a lot of trading takes place. My personal take before I pass the mic is I hate trading unless it's something simple like head for a head, torso for a torso. It's too subjective for my taste. It's too murky. I will trade you cash for your parts. That's how I want to trade. It's just so much easier. It's no fuss, no muss. It's the same reason why I don't flip or do my taxes the way that James was describing. I'm just too lazy and it's too much red tape. So, trading, take it away, Kerry.
Oh man. Nothing I have to say is good, but I don't know. I guess like okay, I'll just obviously speak from my experience, but Citizen Brick, like I've found, is really hard to trade because people think their stuff is worth way more than yours. And one thing I put here is you'll burn bridges if you're aiming for a twofer. I don't know if you guys use that saying in the
Yep.
States. You do?
Twofer? Yeah.
Like a
Yeah.
twofer?
We
Okay,
don't say
great.
decal. We say twofer.
Decal makes way more sense. But I've had some experiences where I've helped people out in some way, and then they'll come at me and be like, "Hey, I got this thing you want, but in order to get it, like, I want like this $300 fig." And to me, I'm like, how does that work? You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying that if I do you a favor, you have to do me a favor, but I'm obviously not going to be helping those people out anymore. And it's always with trading. It's never with money. But anyway, if it doesn't feel fair, like buying and selling, trust your gut. Because a lot of the times, in my experience, I've encountered a lot of like deals that just like end up fizzling or blowing up because the other person is just like, no, my stuff's like worth way more. So, but then on the other hand, there's like times when it's like, hey, I want that, you want this, let's swap. Great, everyone's happy, and that's how it should be. Do you do trading, James, or do you just do?
Yeah, pretty commonly actually,
Yeah?
especially with Sket. It's the only way me and Sket do business. We
That's
trade
the way
this and
Skit does
that.
business, period, is trading.
Yeah, good point. That's just me.
What are your thoughts on, like, have you run into like complications?
I agree with everything you're saying. I think with Citizen Brick, it is difficult at times because I think people too often try to convert everything into monetary value instead of just kind of realizing you have this and I want it, and I have this thing that you want, and let's just actually trade, right? Trading to me shouldn't be like a conversion to currency, because if you're going to do that, just go with Brett's philosophy, trade cash. But if you're going to trade, just kind of say, these are relatively equivalent and these are the things that one another wants. And so let's just make that happen. I try to do that when I trade with Sket, for example. I don't know who really wins. Over a long period of time, it's a total wash. So in that sense, I think that relationships are even more important with trading. And so don't sour relationships with trade activity.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
won't trade with anybody that I don't know. Because there's also that inherent trust of, well, I'm about to mail this thing out, and I have to assume that they're going to mail their stuff to me, and they're not just going to take my shit and never mail me my stuff.
Yeah.
That's probably the number one reason why I'm not a big fan of trading. But I mean, I guess that also applies to paying for figs as well. I mean, they're going to take my money. I have to assume they're going to put it in the mail. That's why I don't tend to trade with anybody unless I can validate who they are through somebody I know. So again, going back to networking.
Trades are tough too because Citizen Brick is cool to trade because there's just some stuff out there that I didn't know I wanted until somebody showed it to me, and now I want it. But most of the time, I guess with other customs, the odds that you have this exact thing that somebody else wants and they have this exact thing that you want, it doesn't happen that often, right? It's hard to kind of find that perfect storm. And it's really tough when somebody is totally valuing something incorrectly or isn't just trying to make the trade happen. And you actually have that lightning in a bottle where you both have the thing the other person wants. So trades are tough to make happen. And when they do happen, they're awesome.
Something I found when I first started, like when I first started like collecting Citizen Brick, a lot of the stuff I bought was off eBay and it was like way overpriced. So then down the road, it's stuff that I have a really hard time trading because I'm like, oh man, I paid so much for that. And I don't want to trade it. Definitely been guilty of being like, like I paid way too much for it. So like, I'm not going to trade it for like something that you paid like $20 for. But now like realizing that like, just because I paid that much for something doesn't mean that it's worth that much. Right. So I think a lot of people don't think about that. And like in the long run, if you like actually stripped everything down, it's like, how much is it actually worth? You know what I
I
mean?
feel like this episode's becoming like therapy for you guys. It's like I just realized I used to do that.
I'm just
oh my
like
gosh, I
talking
did that
myself
too.
down. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I think, eBay and like whatnot, to me, although I use them, they really screw up the value for a lot of the stuff that's out
It
there.
plays into James's comment about people assigning monetary values to parts. So
Yeah.
I think the best trades I've ever done is when people are like, well, I wanted this head. He's like, do you have any heads that might be interesting? So he just wanted to trade equivalent part for part, which I thought was great and kept it very easy. So I have to assume that like I have to worry about figuring out, well, or is this torso worth 2 legs? Or do I have to pay like 3 heads for this, set of custom arms? I mean, that's the part where I get, I just want to cut through the BS and just give me monetary value and I'll just pay it and we can save ourselves a bunch of time and energy.
I love when a trade goes well. It's it's so much more fun than a sale or a purchase. Because you're both getting something that you both really want, and it's not just cash or like
Yeah. Well, I think I like trading. I traded a lot during Brick Fair, but we were all there in person and we can talk, like actually talk. I think I like that a lot more than trying to do it over DMs.
Yeah.
I'm
for
sure if Brick World, when I get to Brick World, it'll happen there as well. We'll buy a bunch of parts and then we'll find some table and sit down and spill our, loot and see who got what. And, I think that'd be that's enjoyable. And I was able to like make trades like through 3 degrees of trading separation, get parts for people I was shopping for. You know what I mean? That was fun, but that was with a known quantity with people that I knew and trust and knew not only were trying to get their stuff, but they also were considering my interests at heart. But yeah, I think it's the DM arena for trading is what turns me off to it. I don't think there's anything else to talk about with trading. That's it. Oh wait, no, Kerry, terms. Talking about
terms. Yeah. Don't like, if you've made a deal, like don't switch your shit. If you are like, okay, I've run into this as well. People are posting stuff to trade and then they don't want to trade it in the end. So it's like, why are you wasting my fucking time? And I'm sure a few of you listening to this know of one of the recent people, and he's been doing it like
years.
I want to say for years.
I'll say
same shit. he's posting the same shit. And then it's like, why do you still have all this? Like, you've been trading it for years. And it's like, well, no one has the old stuff I want. It's like you're just fucking trolling. Like, what are you doing? Get a life. Anyway, my point is, back to the term thing, is like, if you've made a deal, you made a deal. Like, don't back out of it. I mean, okay, sure, you can. It's your right, but like, it doesn't look good. And people talk about it.
Oh yeah, no, they talk about it. Or it also goes back to with the buying and selling. You know, you make a trade, you get the deals. I've seen instances where people were working multiple trades at the same time with some of the same parts. So they were trying to see which trade they can solidify first while negotiating those very same parts amongst different parties. And that's just messed up. Because then they go back to saying, well, so-and-so has offered me this and this for this part, and then you're just offering me this. What else you got? That's really skeevy. And that one I will judge and say that's a prick move.
It's like it feels like Moneyball. You know, I feel like these are all like GMs of the Oakland A's or something like that. They're all NFL GMs. It's just like you said, it's just not acceptable. You shouldn't leverage other people. You shouldn't use people as a means to an end. I just don't agree with that.
Yeah, we're gonna get so much hate for this episode.
Yeah, can't wait. No,
from bad people.
All right, well, that's all we really got for trading, but I do want to move on to something that transcends buying, selling, trading, and that is shipping. And shipping. Number one, Kerry, you nailed it in your notes. Ship in a timely manner, especially if you don't know the person. That goes back to your earlier comments about communication. If you can't make it to the post office until the weekend and it's Tuesday, say, hey, thanks, got your payment, but I'm not going to be able to the post office until Saturday. That's fine. You know, that's for me, that's easiest to mail on weekends, but sometimes post office is a mile down the street, so I can just, I hit it on the way to work. If I'm running late, I can say, well, I'll just be a little more late. And the big thing that I want to touch on for this section is considering how you ship. I've seen situations where people put their stuff in the post office in the most illogical packaging ever. I mean, it's just short of being rolled up in newspaper. And if you buy a lot on Bricklink, you know what I'm talking about, because there's some really clueless sellers there too that do some really weird shit. The way they mail stuff. Consider the goods that you're mailing. So, like Life Brick and Abnormal, they have these unique metal tins. These squarish looking tins. They can dent. They're not invincible. In fact, a while back, I had gotten the Life Brick Iron Spider set. There were 3 of them, and they were in a longer metal tin, and the metal was pretty thin. One of them got the shit dented out of it, and thankfully the fig wasn't damaged because of the box just suffered so much trauma on the way over from Hong Kong. If I ever sell that, which, come on, let's be honest, I'm not Spidey, but if I were to ever sell that, I would have a hard time because that box the tin looks pretty messed up. I mean, it's like someone stepped on it and then tried to fix it.
You could take it to an auto shop.
Take it to a dent master or whatever. And a more recent example would be gin. Personally, his packaging to me is not ideal. Those really thin lids can pop off easily, and they can crack under pressure. So I would not put a gin case in a padded envelope. I would only put that in a box. Same thing with the Abnormal Life Brick tins. If it's like a clamshell, like a jewelry case clamshell, like what PCB comes in, padded envelope all day. That thing's got plenty of protection. But I also make sure my stuff isn't rattling around. So whatever's in that jewel case is going to be, or that clamshell is going to be in a little baggie as well. And I've got a whole bin full of old baggies that I can just pull one out if I need it. And even with Abnormal, we all know how, if you ever ordered an Abnormal figure, you always know it sounds like it's broken when you get it because that damn tile is floating around on the inside. And I've talked to Lynn about this. I was like, you got to stop doing this because it scares me every time I get it. So I even put the little tile inside a little baggie, so it's not rattling around like crazy. Because I don't want to scare the buyer when they see their package.
I have received something in a paper envelope, international shipping, and I was like, what the actual fuck? I'd never seen that before. And just to elaborate, do you know those envelopes where the metal thing pokes through and then you
Yeah.
press the
Yeah.
tongs
Inner
down?
office mailers.
Yeah. And that was it. Like, and I can't even believe they arrived and they weren't damaged, but I was just like, whew. And not only that, the shipping that took forever, and it was just excuse after excuse. Just to circle back, ship in a timely manner. If you have time to like post stuff for sale, you better ship it. Like, you know, you're taking people's money and then you're like, oh yeah, I'm so busy for like a month. Like, not cool.
I think all shipments should go out by the following weekend. Personally.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, yes. So bubble mailers, I know people have had trouble with those. You can put stuff in a bubble mailer. You can like I recently shipped some stuff where I wrapped it in bubble. What do you call it? Bubble shit?
Wrap?
Yeah. Bubble shit. I wrapped it in bubble shit, and then I put cardboard all around it, and I put it in a bubble mailer, so it's like way more protected because I didn't have any boxes. And like it's not gonna, even if the bubble mailer itself tears, like the stuff's not gonna fall out because it's like in a nice little bundle in there.
I prefer boxes. I used to work at UPS. I'm very familiar with what happens in the back of these trucks, and your packages just get beat the hell up. And sometimes with bubble wrap, there's just so much weight piled on top of it, it's just going to get damaged. I think a clamshell and bubble wrap is fine, and pretty much nothing else. That's how I feel about it. Ship in a box,
and you can
whenever
you can find these boxes pretty cheap. You can buy them in bulk. I buy them in bulk packs of 100 or 50 on Amazon. They're about the same size as a Citizen Brick box. And if you have trouble and you don't want to buy those boxes, save the boxes that your figs are coming in, or the boxes that are getting shipped to you, because like Citizen Brick boxes, you can flip them inside out, and it's a pretty white box, totally clean. Slap a label on there, and you're good to go. I've got a whole closet full of Citizen Brick boxes and Stud Stock Shop boxes, and boxes that other people have sent to me. Or Truid's got some good boxes. So if you're ever like in a position where you're like, well, I don't have the supplies or the money to pay for these things, well, then just use what you got.
It's a lot better than damaged, $100.
Right. I'd rather get a
example.
shitty box that protects it than nothing at all. Going back to shipping with the box, when I get to the post office, I'm going to walk you guys through really quick how I ship something to somebody after I make a sale. Number one, I pack it and I tell them, well, of course, you verify address, but then I pack it, I make sure it's taped shut properly and that it can't just accidentally pop open. If it's an address that's international, I tend to print it out. I didn't subscribe to stamps.com or pirate ship. I know I need to. But I will print, I'll just open up Word or Illustrator and I'll type it out and print out if it's an international address, because I don't want to risk there being a misunderstanding of what a lowercase I or an L is, or a 0 or an O. So when I get to the post office and I mail it out, once all the labels are on that box or that envelope, I take it back from the clerk and I take a photo of it. So now I've got a documented record that package has all the U.S. Postal Service or FedEx or whatever labels adhered to it, including the tracking number that was assigned to it. When I get out of the post office, I go to the little counter and I immediately, whether if it's a PayPal, I might put it in the PayPal, add a shipping number, or I just DM them. I DM them a picture of the box that I took. And I do that because sometimes folks live in apartment buildings or dormitories and they have like a central mail repository. And this enables them to say, this is what I'm looking for, and have a visual reference. or if a mail package is lost, they can go to the post office saying, this is what it looks like, and they can look in the back for it. And it's helped more often than not. And then the other thing is after I send the photo, I then type the tracking number into a DM, a separate DM with just that information. And then I send a separate DM that says what the estimated time of delivery is on the receipt. The reason why I do these separately is so that people can just easily copy that tracking number out of the DM conversation and paste into whatever tracker they use. Same thing when I give people my PayPal address. I never give my PayPal address in the middle of a DM. I always give a separate DM with just that. And it helps people out a lot where they can just copy and then paste rather than have to copy, select which part they're copying, all that other bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
So in summary, take a picture with all the labels on it. I DM them the picture. I DM them the tracking number in a separate DM. And then I DM the estimated time of delivery. And then I forget that it ever happened until they tell me they've received it.
Or like me, they don't tell you.
If they tell you, yeah.
If they tell you. But I always do that. And if it's international, I'll take pictures of the customs form as well with the tracking number attached to it. And I send a picture of the customs form. So they know they filled it out. I filled it out correctly. Just because I want to make sure that all areas are covered. Now, I touched on this in a previous episode. A buddy of mine was told that by the buyer that the figure did not arrive and they wanted a refund. And he did exactly what I asked him to do, what I told him he should do. He had taken the photo of the box, he had taken the pictures, he sent everything ahead. And this guy eventually, the buyer, opened up a claim on PayPal. And I told him, I was like, dude, you're getting scammed. If they lost the package, post office, for those who don't know, the US Post Office, they can geolocate approximately where the last scan was for that item. So they can tell you within like a couple houses, if it says delivered, they can find out definitely what street it was delivered on. So if it's delivered to the wrong mailbox or the wrong block or the wrong building, they can do that. They can look it up. He did all that, and he won the claim because the guy had no proof that he didn't receive it. But the reality is there's no way to tell. There's no way to tell that he did not get it. He only has all this evidence that he did send it. It went through the system. It was tracked. It wasn't one of those situations with a shipping label created that sits dormant for like 2 weeks. And those scams. He did what he could do. Now, he could have offered like a partial refund, but in the end, we don't know if that guy got the figure or not. So, oh well.
Yeah, I think if you've taken all those steps that you just described as the seller, and you've gone through that level of diligence to make it work, I think that if the tracking shows that it was delivered, it's just not on you anymore. I think it gets a little fuzzy if the package gets lost in German customs or something like that on its way to Australia. I don't know what to do in those situations. In fact, I'd look to both of you for advice on that. I don't know who is responsible for that at that point, because you could argue, that what you shipped me didn't make it here, and whose obligation was it to buy insurance? I'm not totally sure. If something's lost, presumably the seller can have some claim to if there's some kind of an insurance claim on it, or if it's like priority mail and you have some kind of coverage on it, then the seller gets that back, not the buyer. It gets really confusing at that point. And I think the goal is just to limit those kinds of situations by, like you said, using a clear label, shipping in a box when it's international for the most part, being communicative, and then, just hoping that the Postal Service does its job.
Yeah, you mentioned insurance, and I often, nobody ever asks me how much to insure something for. Usually packaging, comes with some sort of insurance already, by default. I've never had anyone ask me for additional insurance, but, I'll tell you one thing with, we'll go into international shipping in a moment. Actually, we can do that right now. When talking about international shipping, when I fill out the customs form, I always, I've always just put the value at $5. I know that sounds ridiculous when you're sending maybe like hundreds of dollars worth of figs, but it keeps it off the radar so that the folks don't have to pay a bunch of tariffs in some countries and taxes on these things. I always label it as gift. And on the description, on the contents, this is a pro tip. I always put Lego toy dash no battery. If you put no battery on the customs form, I found that you don't get hung up in customs as much because it's not something they're looking for. Because when you go as mail international, at least in the US, we have to hit like 20 different disclaimers on the screen at the post office saying there's no lithium batteries, there's no batteries, there's no explosives, there's no aerosols. So by putting that in the customs description of the contents, I think that helps out a lot.
I do pretty much the same thing. I don't want somebody in another country to have to pay a boatload of fees, when they receive their fig. That's not fun. You've got something new in the mail, and then you've got an invoice for $50 in duty fees because I listed that this minifigure is worth $300. Like, nobody in customs is going to understand that this custom minifigure inside that case is worth that kind of money. Nobody. So I do the exact same thing. I mean, if there is some kind of like a lost parcel claim later on, maybe that could have an impact because you claimed it's only worth $5. So that's essentially what they're going to pay you to like recoup your loss. That could come up. But at some point, you just have to trust that the Postal Service is going to do its job. And in my experience over 5 years, there have been like 2 or 3 packages that have gotten lost out of, I don't know, probably 100. It's not going to happen that often.
Only 2 other tips I have for international shipping is there are resources in Google. If you're not sure how to format an address in the way that country formats their addresses, there's plenty of resources on Google to teach you how to format address. Like Canada is really easy. It's very similar to America. I love shipping things to Singapore because it's just Singapore. There's no like city, town, country, county. UK is like city, province, territory, village. It's just like there's like 7 different tiers that they drill down to. But it's helped me a lot to just Google these things out. And then quite often, if I'm shipping to somebody else in that same country, I need to do a better job of keeping a catalog so that I can just look it up again really quickly or say like, how did I do this last time? Because I've done that for my buddy in Poland that I ship. He buys a lot of Brickmania stuff. And so he ships to me and then I ship to him. And so I pretty much know how to format a Polish address really well. Which actually goes, James, you want to talk about stamps.com? Because you brought it up several times now. And you might sell me on it.
There's one thing I like about stamps.com, and it is that you get really good rates with UPS. So if you're shipping overseas and you want to get it there really fast, you have to pretty much either use like, FedEx or UPS. USPS priority mail is pretty quick, but it's not going to beat FedEx and UPS overseas. And if you have the opportunity to use DHL, use DHL. That is just like a miracle the way it gets there so quickly. Stamps.com gets you a pretty decent rate on UPS. Like, whereas you'd normally pay, I don't know, $70 for like, to ship up to 1 pound overseas in like 3 to 7 days. If you have a stamps.com account, you can ship that for like $36 or something.
Holy shit.
I think they charge you like $10 a month to be part of it, but like one transaction every 3 months would make it worth it just because of that savings. And then the benefit is that you can get a cool product to somebody overseas much faster, and you're getting it at the same kind of rates that resellers like Tier 1 and Tracy and Racksnap, you're getting it at those same rates that they're getting. So I promise I don't get a cut from stamps.com or anything. I've just had I just have had a good experience with using UPS through that. You don't get any favorable rates with the Postal Service or anything like that, but that benefit you get on like worldwide expedited shipping with UPS is worth the monthly fee.
Is Pirate Ship the same idea as Stamps?
I don't know. I wish I had Nick on board.
We don't have it here, so
no. I've used Pirate Ship only as a means of estimating cost for shipping. Like I'll put in the dimensions and the weight, and it gives me a very accurate when I'm trying to like, how much would it cost to ship to, this country? So it's been really good in that regard, but I've not to actually subscribe to where I'm putting labels out and all that stuff. I just need to do it. I just keep putting it off. But I also, again, I got the post office right down the street. They know me. And most of my sales in the last few months have been domestic. So I'd say maybe international accounts for maybe 30%. You can also limit yourself to not ship internationally, but I think you'll be losing out on a lot of potential customer base for your sales.
Yeah.
I agree.
I've definitely met a lot of people. I've had a tough time being in Canada because people are like, shipping's too expensive, or I don't want to do the customs forms. But I did want to say thanks to you guys for keeping your values low and saying a gift, because like I pay a lot of duty, like a lot, like any Citizen Brick package, any True Red, like basically anything. And now like Tracy, like all that stuff I get duty on.
I got my first FedEx bill 2 shipments ago from Tier 1. Well, she valued the package at a pretty high. Oh, she valued it accurately. It was a very packed box. There's like maybe 8 figs or 9 figs in there. And so then I got hit with a $65 bill from FedEx, from Customs Border Patrol, because the declared value was so high. So I told her, I was like, we got to negotiate this. She felt bad,
it
and
stings.
we worked it out, but it was the first time I've ever had to do that. Like, I got contacted by Customs Border Patrol to fill out a form, declare my importer number and all this other crazy shit because of the value of the package. I was like, good Lord, man, I'm not a high roller. I promise this.
You sure?
Well, so bringing up your concerns about duty taxes and stuff, that brings us to our next section, which is stockpiling. So what is stockpiling? Basically, often, within our circle of friends, we have folks that are international, like, we have our co-host Phil, and of course, Kerry here, who live overseas from me. And what happens is, quite often, I will create a pile at my house of figs that they have bought domestically here in the US that I can then ship out all at once. And, Kerry, you've had piles in a couple places, right? Have you not?
Yeah. Shout out to Brick Cinema and Dash Bricks. They tend to always have little pals for me, and I love you guys, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, I usually I'll get stuff, and then I say, hey, do you have something pending over with Nick or Dash? And then I'll just send what I have for you to them, and then eventually they then send it all to you all at once.
Yes, it's amazing.
I've helped out a friend in in Singapore that way, and yeah, it's a good way to just, like you said, they're your heroes now, right? I like to think somebody feels that way about me too, because I've been able to save them just tons of money on
And for the international folks listening, I know Soonsol and Mark's Bricks both have warehouses here in the States that they can ship their packages to in the US, and they can just compile it up, and then they ship out everything all at once there as well. So for instance, I've got something coming to my house for Soonsol Chicken Bricks, and rather than shipping that internationally for like $17, I'm just going to have to ship it over to Delaware for $5. I think Marcus's warehouse is over in Portland, and he's over in Taiwan. So over time, I can just send him things occasionally, and then when he feels like it, he can say, all right, send everything my way, and just pay one fee. Like, Phil's got a superhero box and a Citizen Brick box going on at my house right now, and then I've got another pile going for someone who's in Australia. And it's just shelf space for me. It's on top of my bookcase. It doesn't cost me any energy. And so basically, if you have friends overseas or you're shipping to someone overseas, ask them, saying, hey, is there anybody you trust that is currently holding stuff for you? Because I can just send it to them. And then it all works out. Yeah, but that's basically it for stockpiling. It's really simple. It's about, again, communication and building your network. Don't be a prick.
That could be the title of this episode.
Yeah.
Don't be a prick.
A guide to buying, selling, and trading.
Or cut the BS.
You're going to get demonetized.
I wish I was monetized. Oh, man. I lose money every month on this shit. So that's about all we had on stockpiling. It's a really simple thing. As I mentioned, just don't be a prick, communicate, and ship responsibly. So lastly, the last thing we're going to talk about today are the secondhand forums. These are the nexus, of where we find all these figs that we're buying and selling outside of the reseller market. Uh, I think universally we can all say eBay is probably the worst place to go to finding figs. Would you agree?
Yep. I agree.
It's you're paying you're paying for all the fees the seller has to incur to sell on it. It's part of the reason why things are listed so high there. And I think there just seems to be people who are willing to pay some of those prices, but most of the time the stuff just sits up there at exorbitant prices. It never sells, but it creates the impression that this product has that value. But it's never selling. It's just going to sit there. It's never going anywhere. So, in my opinion, with eBay, it's creating like this bizarre inflation for the rate, for the values of some of these things, and there's no actual transactions taking place. So eBay's not great. Maybe it'll improve. Maybe they'll lower the seller fees, and maybe they'll, and maybe people will just be a little bit more reasonable with the prices that they list. But right now, that's not the case.
Whatnot is basically like eBay Live. You're actively bidding in real time with a deadline. You can't, unlike eBay, you can't, card snipe somebody at the last second with a higher bid. When you bid on something that's up for auction, more time is added to the clock for folks to continue to bid. So learned that the hard way the very first time I used Whatnot. It's like, what the hell? It's 6 more seconds. Yes. But the problem you see sometimes on Whatnot is if somebody really wants something and there's a prick in the audience, they know you're going to keep bidding higher. They'll just keep doing false bids to drive it up. I've seen that's happened to me as the Spidey fan. They saw me in there and they just didn't want me to have it because I buy all the Spideys, and they drove something up. And people in the crowd in the chat were like, "Come on, man, just let him have it," And I don't know if the seller could have chimed in and done something to stop it, but that is something that can happen. FOMO is at its worst on Whatnot. Like I said, I recently saw UV figs going for $170, $180. Not to discredit the sellers, all they're doing is putting it on a stage and letting people bid on it. They're not doing anything wrong. I enjoy going to those streams. They become like little family communities where you get to know the sellers and the regulars are there. It's almost like a hangout joint. A lot of people go to those things without even the intent of buying. They just hang out. So I think that's great from a community's perspective. But if you go in there, you should make sure that you have a set budget, because once you win an auction on Whatnot, your card is charged immediately, and the seller knows right away if that charge didn't go through. So there's no being shady about it. So Whatnot is a place to go and buy stuff. However, you do run the risk of paying a larger than normal fee. So just keep that in mind. And then on Discord, there are some places on Discord. It's basically just a community bulletin where folks will also post things for sale. I'm not in the Discords, so I can't talk to that. I've got my reasons for not being in them. But from whom I've talked to, and if anyone's here in a particular Discord and wishes to talk to that, you can go right ahead. Kerry, are you in a CB Discord?
I'm in a couple. Yeah, it's just there's different channels, and there's normally a trade, buy, sell tab in them, and people just post their stuff, just much like Instagram.
But the benefit being that you have other channels that vet who's a good, reliable seller or reviews of those buyers.
Yeah, there's also
So
and people to watch out.
So you can buy with more confidence, at least. So that's good. And then Facebook groups. There are a couple of Facebook groups out there. Some are a little more strict with their rules than others. If you don't follow those rules to the T, some have a single strike ban. The idea being is if you can't follow simple directions, then eliminate room for error on a deal and just boom, done. I've seen long time, normally trusted collectors get kicked and banned from Facebook groups because they just didn't follow the rules. some particular Facebook groups force you to list the prices, which is great. Also, there's that recorded history like Discord where you can check and see who's posted what in the past and if there have been any discussions or arguments or whatever, figure out what's going on. Or what I've done on Facebook is if I've seen something that I want to buy from somebody and I look and see who else has DM'd him on previous posts, I might reach out to those people saying, hey, did you wind up closing a deal with this buyer? How'd it go? And that gives me a little bit of insight in what to expect.
Hot tip.
So then we also have the secondhand markets on the reseller websites. Tracy, of course, has one. Others have experimented with it. LCM was experimenting with it at one time. I'm not sure if they still do it. Rex is probably the most prolific one with, he's listed over like 50 different chapters or whatever. Some of the older ones are discontinued or closed out, but and no longer work. But the good thing about Rex is that he always leaves the listing up after it's sold. So you can see the price that was listed there as reference. And that's a pretty nice way of going back and seeing what some things might be worth in the secondhand market. And then lastly, I don't want to go. I know I said I bring up Rex, people are probably groaning in right now, but the reality is it's there. It's probably the best secondhand market. We're not going to go into his shipping practices or his recent communication concerns. I'm not going to act like it's all hunky-dory, but the reality is it's the best secondhand market out there. Except for the Geek Exchange.
Yeah.
So the Geek Exchange, for those who don't know, is something that I created as a secondhand market that I run on Instagram. And if you listen to my episode on Brick Chat, when we did a little crossover, I talked about it there. But essentially, I've got a pretty good reach on my stories. I get upwards to like 450 to 600 views per story for whatever reason. And so realizing that not everybody has that kind of reach, I offer to, in good faith, help folks, get the word out that they have stuff for sale. So one Sunday every month for 12 hours, 12 p.m. Eastern to 12 p.m. to 12 a.m. midnight. So all the time zones can, participate. I simply have people send me a photo or a collage of photos for what they're looking to buy or sell. And then I post it to my story. And I tag them in it. And then that allows people viewing my stories to know who's got what for sale or what they're looking to buy. And James, it's great that you're here because you once did a Geek Exchange spotlight, which is when I do a Geek Exchange where instead of everybody sending me stuff, just one person because they have a whole lot of stuff they're trying to sell. How'd that go for you, James?
I'm gonna have to file with the IRS when my taxes. It went really well. It was easy. It was smooth. I hope. I don't know how much work you had to put into that.
It's easier than the regular Geek Exchange because you just send me all the photos and then I just post them and then I can go about my day. Geek Exchange is literally me 12 hours glued to my phone, constantly downloading images and reposting them and doing DMs nonstop.
It was awesome. And I met a lot of good people through that process. I sold a lot of things. I put figs in people's hands that really wanted them more than I did at the time. And I think, I'm pretty sure I paid my bills that month too. So it was fantastic.
Yeah, we had, it's a lot of fun and it's slowed down a bit, but I love it when people tell me when they've made a good sale or they found something they've been looking for. Because I do catalog those and I post them to my stories as Geek Exchange Success. And it's funny because then I start seeing other people using the same term, Geek Exchange Success. So yeah, if you're listening and you do happen to use the Geek Exchange and I don't care, big or small, let me know. It lets me know that it's worth my time and it's worth your time. It's overall for those curious, as far as like scams go, whatever. We've done 19 months in a row. I've only had to have 2 conversations with people about their behavior on the Geek Exchange. And it was really just coming down to one person who, it just came down to both of them, in their communication styles and how they work deals or how respondent they were in their DMs. It just wasn't working for a lot of people and I was getting a lot of complaints. So I just talked to both of them, right? Because everyone deserves a chance to, correct themselves. And it hasn't been a problem since. So it's become because my name's attached to it. So it's important to me that it's legit. And if people do have an issue, I'm very aggressive in investigating all sides of the matter to make sure that accurate judgment can be made. Because if I find someone's jerking you around or ghosting or wasting people's time, I have no problem kicking him. I don't care about my follower count. I'll kick them and ban them so they'll never see another post of mine or another story of mine ever again. So, but I think aside from people's individual stories and postings, I think that's everything regarding secondhand market. Would you agree? Or
Yeah, those are the big ones. Yeah. After that, it's individual Instagram stories, individual transactions, just random stuff. But
now there
those are
are
the big ones.
stuff on international markets on like WeChat or like Naver, I think it's called. I don't have access to those, and if I did, obviously I don't speak Korean, I don't speak Chinese, so it's difficult for me to participate. But if you build your network, you can have friends that do speak those languages or reside in those areas to look for you. I'm looking for a particular Spidey fig that from a long time ago. I've got a friend over in Taiwan looking for it, in all the online, forums over there. So there's a whole world of customs that the Western audience doesn't even see in regards to marketplace, and especially on WeChat. So leverage those connections and see what you can do to find the things out that way. But yeah, man, we covered a lot. This is a long episode.
Whew. Yeah.
I mean, we're gonna through editing and stuff, this thing might still be about 2 hours long. So, but I think it's all good. I think it's all good information.
Yeah, it didn't feel 2 hours.
It really didn't.
doing
It really didn't. And I mean, I got a little sleepy when you were talking about PayPal math.
Like I said,
That's just
speed it
math.
up,
But no, overall, no, this is a lot of fun. And this is going to be probably my second favorite episode, only because I like these relatable ones that we try to do to help everyone out, that folks can hopefully glean a little bit of insight into how to alter their collecting habits to make it more fun for them.
Yeah. And it kind of felt like we're on the same page about a lot of these things, which means, there must be a reason we all feel that way. We've been doing this a while, and we all three have reasonably good reputations with all this stuff. And so I'm glad that in many cases we were kind of on the same page.
Yeah, and I'm sure that we haven't covered I'm sure there's something we may have missed, which I welcome any feedback on that. And for those who may feel offended by some of the things that we pass judgment on regarding buying, flipping, auctioning, that's fine. We don't have to all be on the same page, but we can all agree that we want this to be a fun hobby. And, all I ask and hope is that folks make those efforts to enjoy what they're trying to do. Because if it's just all transactional in nature and there's no joy in it, then what's the point? I mean, just get a dog. I mean, it's just, I don't. If this was all about, if I didn't have community, I wouldn't even be in this hobby right now. I can have all the connections in the world to get what I want. It wouldn't be the same because I have no one to talk to about it.
Yeah.
And if no one wanted to talk to me about it, then what's the point? So. Alrighty. Well, that being said, we're gonna go ahead and wrap this up. Kerry, James, did you have any other final thoughts?
Don't be a dick.
Yeah. Communicate well.
Shipping boxes.
And shipping boxes.
Yeah. And don't work for UPS.
Yeah. Friends and family. Math is hard.
1099K.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, that's going to do it for us. I just want to say thanks everybody for sticking around. I know this is a long one, but I hope you got some good information from it. I know some of this was sort of some finer points that even I forgot about that I could probably put back to better practice. And as you've already seen tonight or today during this whole recording, that even we're not infallible and we even, screw up from time to time. So that being said, I'll put some links in the show notes, maybe like the boxes that I buy that you can purchase in bulk for shipping and the padded envelopes on Amazon. All links to Kerry and James's Instagram, so you can hit them up with any questions you have. And once again, if you have any reasons or wants or needs to want to support this podcast and my efforts, you can say thank you by buying me a coffee. The link will be in the show notes. Off as always, it's never obligated, but always appreciated. Until then, we will see you next time. Say bye.
Bye.
I want you on my rack. I want to make you ring. I want you to unwrap. I want to pull your string. Bring me the next